Hi guys, today we're going to talk about object-oriented programming in Visual Basic. Now, normally when you start to learn Visual Basic, you start to learn under the structured programming style, which is where you have main program, and then you have functions underneath the main program, and these functions interact with each other as well as the main program. And the problem with this structure is that after a while, when you get larger programs, it gets hard to tell what function uh, goes with what function and what function does what. So they went from this to trying to add classes where you could pull in functionality from a class for specific things to keep it off of your main program and to try to make it a little more easy to work with. And essentially that's come down to what they call object-oriented programming. Now, in object-oriented programming, you essentially start with a main object, in this case vehicle, and you create other objects from that. A good example is a button. If you have a button, that's an object. If you create a new button, that's an instance of that object. So you can have button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, and those would all be instances of the main object. So anything that pertains to the main object will pertain to all those sub-objects. And you can see kind of how they line it up here. It can be a land vehicle, and under land vehicle, maybe a bicycle, car, and a motorcycle. Under car, maybe you have a bus, a truck, and an SUV. Under trucks, maybe you have light truck, medium truck, or heavy truck. Now, these are all descendants of the vehicle class, and adversely, these are the ancestors of the classes below. So, essentially, a heavy truck all the way at the bottom of the list will have everything that vehicle has. It'll have everything that land vehicle has. And it'll have everything that car has. However, it won't have everything that bicycle has or everything that motorcycle has. If you think of it as tires, okay? Vehicles have tires. So if you're just looking for the part itself, the tire would belong to vehicle. However, if your vehicle has 4 tires, the quantity of tires, bicycle only has 2, motorcycle only has 2, but a car has 4. Therefore, heavy truck will have 4 tires. If heavy truck was, for some strange reason, under motorcycle, then it would have 2 tires. So you can see how it inherits the information from the object above it. And this way, it makes it a little easier to understand exactly where you're getting your information from and where it's going inside the object itself or inside a handler. A handler is simply an object that controls another object. And you'll see how that works in here. Now we're going to create our first object. In our example here, we're creating a lock. And it's a combination lock, and it has 5 tumblers. So we're going to make an object called tumbler, and we're going to make it work with this lock. Now just to show you real quickly how this is going to work, as a setup, we have a tumbler, and we need 5 of these tumblers. So each one of these tumblers is going to have all the options that this tumbler has. So in this case, number. They all have the number property that can be set. Now you can have as many properties as you want and as many functions as you want, but whatever you have in here would be accessible in all these as well. So these are instances of this tumbler. Now we're going to create a lock handler, and our lock handler is going to just take care of all the input and output going to this tumbler object. It's also going to deal with this tumbler list. It's going to make a list of these objects so that we have them all in a collection somewhere where we can deal with them. So the first subroutine that we have under lock handler is to clear the tumbler list. So we can clear this whole list out. The second one is to add a tumbler to the list. So if we want to add any of these tumblers to the list, we can use that. We have a load tumblers, which essentially creates the tumbler It would take a copy of the tumbler, create a new instance of it, and then assign values to the number property. And then we have a function for getting the tumbler list itself and sending it back to the program. Now, another way that I can show you how this works is more of a flow style. So we have a tumbler object, and we have our lock handler, and our program is somewhere up here in the world. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a tumbler and we're going to create a new instance of that tumbler for 5 separate tumblers. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clear the tumbler list. If there's anything already on it, we want to wipe that off so that the tumbler list is empty. And then we're going to take our tumblers and we're going to add them to the tumbler list. Then we're going to take our tumbler list and send it back to our program. The first thing we need to do is create our tumbler object. So we're going to go to Add, Class, and we're going to call this simply tumbler.vb. And in our tumbler, we need to create that one property called number. There's a shortcut on Visual Studio for creating properties and classes. You just simply type in prop and hit tab key twice. Oh, I didn't hit tab key twice correctly here. And now it creates everything you need for this object. Now this looks a little confusing at the moment, so I'm going to try to explain this to you first. Let me shrink this down a little. The first thing you're going to see is a private value, and you can make this anything you want. In our case, we're going to make it as an integer, and you can see it pop down because it changed this to integer as well. That's what these yellow boxes do, which I'll show you for the value. But this is just a private value that's only able to be used inside this class, just like any other variable. And we're going to change this name to num value, because it's going to be the number, the value of the number we're going to send in or send out of this object. But I'm going to open these up just to show you. If you see here, this says new property value, it says new property value, and it says new property value. When I change this top one to num value and hit tab, it changes these automatically for me. It knows which is which. So same thing with integer, it changed the integer for us. Now, these two structures here, get and set, simply get the value from the object and give it to the program calling it, and set sets the value from the program calling it. Okay, now we're going to call this number because that's our property name. So now we have, under tumbler, we have a property called number. That's an integer. If we call this number, it's going to give us the number, whatever number value is in num value, which is our private value up here, our private variable. If we're setting the value, it's going to ask for a value, and then it'll make num value that value, and that's all it is. Now you can change that here if you wanted to. You could just do +1, let's say, for something real simple, and if we sent a 5 to the number value, then it would change num value to 6, because 5 + 1 = 6, and then the next time you called this, it would give a 6 back, because num value now equals 6. If that's something that happens with every tumbler, every time you're going to use it, this is where you want to make that change. In our case here, to make things simple, we're not making any changes to it, we're not doing anything else to it. We're just going to have a property here. And we can also create functions and subroutines under here that can be used with this object. In this case, we're going to do that in a handler. So we're going to save this, and we're going to go over to our project again, right click, we're going to go to Add and Class one more time, and this time we're going to call this lock handler.vb. So anytime we handle our lock, that's what we're working with, our lock handler. Now our lock handler is going to deal with all the input and output from our tumbler. and from our lock list or our tumbler list. So we're going to start off with a private variable, and we're going to call this tumbler list. And we're going to make this as new system.collections.generic.list. Now you'll see it'll be called list of t. So when you hit that, it'll bring it up to the of. You have to hit space, and this is going to be a list of our tumblers. So we're going to do tumbler, which is our object. So this is nothing more than a list of tumblers. However we make it, however many or few we make, that's our list of tumblers. Next, we're going to allow people to get this list from the lock handler object. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a public function, and we're going to call it getTumblerList. We don't need anything to be, we're not asking for any information. We're just going to give them the list. So this is going to be as system.collections.generic.list of t, and this will be tumbler again. And then we're just going to return our tumbler list. So now when they call and they ask for a list of tumblers, they say they want to get tumbler list, they're going to get a list of tumblers. So they're going to get a list of that objects. And the list that they're going to get is going to be the list that we created, our tumbler list. The next thing we're going to do is we need to create some tumblers in order to add to our list. So the first thing we'll do here is a public sub, and we're going to call this load tumbler. And in here we are going to declare a tum to equal a new tumbler. So now we're creating a new tumbler itself, and inside the tumbler we want to go to the number property. You see how it comes up on the IntelliSense there for you. And we're going to make that number equal. Now in our case, we're going to just make it equal a random number. I have this code here, which is just going to create a random number from 0 to 9. And we've created a tumbler and put a number in the tumbler. Next thing we're going to want to do is add to tumbler list. And we're going to add the tumbler that we just created, a tum. Now you notice I did this here. I'll do it without that, just so you know. This is just calling a subroutine called add to tumbler list, and it's going to take the tumbler that we created, a tum, and send it to that subroutine. So now we're going to create that subroutine, private sub add to tumbler list, and we're going to ask for by value new tumbler. So we're calling the add tumbler list, and we're sending in a new tumbler as tumbler, and we're taking the tumbler list and we're adding that new tumbler to the list. So there we go. And lastly, we have one other little thing we have to take care of, and that's public sub clear tumbler list. And this is just as simple as it sounds. We just take our tumbler list and clear it. And there we have our lock handler. Now with our lock handler, we are able to do all the things that we could in our picture. And that is, we can get the tumbler list and send it back to the program. We can load a new tumbler. We can take that new tumbler and add it to the list, and we can clear the list. That's all we need to do. So now we go to our main program. And in our main code, we have a button click here. So this is going to give us our new combination. Every time we click this button, it's going to create 5 new tumblers and give us the values of those tumblers. So when we open this program up, the first thing we're going to see is a variable called aLockHandler, which is a new instance of LockHandler. Okay. Then we created a subroutine called loadLock. Now this is what's going to call the LockHandler, and it's going to call the loadTumbler event for each of our tumblers, so we can assign each tumbler. So we have for I equals integer 0 to 4. That'll give us 5 locks, and it'll say aLockHandler dot loadTumbler for each one. So each time that iterates through, it'll load the tumbler. It'll create this as a new tumbler each time. It'll give it the number, and it'll add it to the list. And it'll do that for each one. Okay, then we have our button click. So in our button click, the first thing we want to do is we want to clear our tumbler list. So we add LockHandler.clear tumbler list, and you can see how these come up right in the IntelliSense for you, so you know that you can clear, you can get, and you can load, just like any other control, like a button or anything else. So we cleared our list. Then we're going to call the loadLock subroutine here, and that's going to create all the 5 new locks and add them to the list. Now we're going to take the list and we're going to put it onto our lock. So we have txt tumbler1.text, and I just have them named 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so you know which tumbler it is. It's just text tumbler 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this other box is for something else I'll explain in a minute. And then we just index it. So we have aLockHandler.getTumblerList. So now we have a list. We want the first item on the list, so that would be index 0 dot number. Now if you had more than one property on that tumbler, then you'd have to make sure that you name it here, which we are. We're naming it number. If you had something else in there, you'd call it that. So this basically will just send in all the new locks, all the new tumblers into our lock, and that's all it's going to do. So now if we run this program and we click on new combination, you'll see that it gives us a new combination. Now each one of these is a separate instance of tumbler, but they're all the same object, and they all have the same object properties as each other. So it's just a bunch of iterations of the same thing. And then you can use this for whatever. Now, the question that brought this to my attention, and the reason I'm using this as a lock, is for a game that someone's creating where you have to guess the combination. Okay, so now let's say, just so I can show you how you can add properties to your object and how easy it makes it, let's say they're going to go through here and they have to guess each one of these sequentially. When they get to the 5th lock, if they solve the 5th lock, then you want to give them a certain amount of points. Okay, so this will be our points box here, and this is nothing more than a text box, txt credit. Okay. So now we'll go back to our tumbler. We have that one property in there, and we'll create a new property. Remember, it's prop tab tab, and for this property, we're going to make this value, we're going to call this point value. Okay, because we're going to give them points. And we're going to call this points. And we'll make the points an integer. Okay, so now we have a private variable called point value that we can use to change around, figure out what our points are going to be. We have a public value called points that we can call and get the point value, or we can set the point value. Now in this case, I'm just going to do it real simple, and we're going to say that for every lock that they solve, we're going to give them 20 points. So I can build it right into here. Now I can also go to the lock handler and I can create something under the lock handler to do this. And in the case of this, to eliminate having to add another variable and stuff to the main form, maybe that's the best way to go. So we'll go back here and we'll leave that as value so we can set and change this value from outside the object. If I do it this way, it's not really going to be easy to reset, unless it's going to be the default value, and then you set it, change it accordingly. But just to make it simple, we won't change anything here. We'll leave that alone. Okay, so all we did was created a new value, or a new property here called points. So here we're going to just do a, we don't even have to do a separate subroutine. Right here, when we create our tumbler, we can do it this way. We can add that point value to every tumbler we create, because maybe we want to give certain points for certain tumblers. Now, in our instance, we're just going to give it for the last one to give you an example. But you'll notice that when I go to atum again, dot, now I don't just have number, I have points also. And it's just as easy. All I do is create right there. Now I have 20 points. Okay, so now I go to our form, and by the way, I believe, yes, these are all integers. So here I should actually have .toString at the end, because I need to convert these over to strings. Okay, now we're going to add our value at the end. So only when they solve 5, we're going to give them points. So for our text credit dot text, we're going to equal that to a lock handler dot get tumbler list, and in this case it's instance 4 dot points dot toString. And then we'll run our program. Now obviously in our program they're not solving anything, it's just going to give us the numbers. So, but when it gives us the numbers, you'll see that it gives us 20 points, because it's pulling the point value from number 5. Now you can make separate point values for each object if you want, just like you did for the number itself. There's tons of things you can do. This is just to show you how you can pull it off of the list then and use it. So I hope this helps you understand object-oriented programming, and helps you understand that you take the object and you do the basic functionality with the object, and you can use a handler when you have to extend the ability or make lists of the object itself. Sometimes you don't need to make whole lists of the object. Sometimes you can use the object directly. And if you wanted to use the object directly, you can do that. All you have to do is create a new variable. So you would create a private variable and maybe call this a tumbler as new tumbler. Now in this case you're creating a new tumbler. It's only one tumbler that you're creating. So then when you go down here, you can take your a tumbler dot, and you can access numbers and points for that particular tumbler. So that's your big difference. The handler allows you to make a list and use multiple tumblers easily, but you can use individual objects if you need to, or if you need to have them separated a little bit more across your code. You're going to use them for more than one part of the code, but you're not going to, you know, like maybe you have a player and an enemy and they're both characters, so you're going to do different things with those, and you need to access that object directly. You can do it like that. You can also use handlers for that also though. So I hope this helps you understand it and helps you show how useful it can be in a program. And I hope you take the opportunity to look at the programs that you've done or the programs you're working on and try to implement more object-oriented programming into what you're doing. Not every part of your program will be an object. You only use object-oriented program for objects. You still can use functions and subroutines in your main form that don't have anything to do with the object itself. There's plenty of other room to grow your program, both structurally and with objects. So it's just a matter of how you think about the program when you're creating it. If you think about the program and think about the objects in there, now they don't have to be physical objects, but they should be related objects to each other, and that's kind of how classes came about, where you have a class that is a specific function for something. And between classes and objects, you can kind of keep your stuff categorized a little bit easier to make it simpler to operate with, and it keeps them off of your main program so that they're over on your Solution Explorer as a separate file. And you can actually take these files out of here and copy them into any program and use them the same way. If I wanted to use this tumbler in a different program, I could just take the tumbler VB and take the lock handler VB, copy them directly into the other program, and start accessing their functionality. And that's all there is to it. So leave any comments or questions below, and I hope this helps. Until next time, keep smiling.